Two boys left home one morning and never returned, 16 years later the reason.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Chicago, a Sunday morning, the sky seemed cloaked in a thick, cold layer of ash. The clock struck 7:30 a.m. John pushed open his wooden front door and pulled his wool scarf up around his neck. "Is Charles waiting out there already, Mom?" His mother, Laura, was pouring milk into a glass and glanced out the window. "Yeah, he's been standing there for 5 minutes. I told him to come in, but he wouldn't." John chuckled, slipping his phone into his coat pocket. "He's like my dad, punctual to the minute. Take the sandwich I packed. If you skip breakfast again, I'll skin you alive." Yeah, John said, kissing her on the cheek before rushing out the door. Charles was leaning against a lamppost, hands in his coat pockets, dark blue eyes staring up at the gloomy sky. "Think it's gonna snow today?" Charles asked. "Maybe. Did you bring gloves?" Charles held up his bare hands. "Forgot. But whatever, I'm not weak." "Right, Super Charles," John laughed. Both boys were 15, tall for their age, looking like young football players striding down the freezing sidewalk. "Where to first?" Charles asked. "The riverbank, then the square, same as usual. If Mr. Matthews' newsstand is open, we'll stop by." "Fine. Just don't make me sit through another one of his war stories. He went on for nearly an hour last time." John laughed. "He just needs someone to listen. What's the harm?" Cold wind slipped through their collars, making them shiver slightly. They kept walking, passing their usual spot, the La Estrella Café. Mr. Ethan, the owner, waved at them from behind the glass. "Out early again, boys? Want some coffee?" Charles called back, "Tomorrow. We're saving money today." Mr. Ethan shook his head, laughing. "Cheapest teens in all of Chicago." John whispered, "When I'm rich, I'll buy out his whole cafe." Charles shrugged. "I'll buy a truck full of books. You and I'll travel the country selling books and eating hamburgers." They both burst out laughing, as if the world were still whole. By evening, the South Side neighborhood began sinking into the soft glow of yellow streetlights. The lampposts buzzed faintly. Drizzle began to fall, and wind swept through every alley. Laura checked the clock for the third time in 10 minutes. "It's 9 already and he's not back." John's father, Ryan, looked up from the TV. "He didn't say he was going anywhere special today?" "No. Said it would be a normal Sunday. No texts all day. Charles's mom called me too." Ryan stood up, pulling out his phone. "I'll try calling him." "Tried already, his phone's off." "Charles isn't picking up either," came a voice from across the street. Charles's mother, Irene, was running over, her coat soaked with rain. "Laura, I haven't seen Charles all day. I thought maybe he was at your place, but now." "No, John's not back either." "Both of them, missing." Laura's heart sank. The chill was no longer from the weather. "Did they have a fight with anyone?" Ryan asked. "No. John's a good kid. We're here to report a disappearance." Two 15-year-old boys, John Carter and Charles Davis, left home yesterday morning. They haven't returned. Laura placed a printed flyer with the boys' photos on the reception desk. Beside her, Irene gripped the edge of her coat, her voice trembling. "They're always on time. They've never been late. We haven't slept all night." The young officer, Samuel Ross, buzz-cut and half-asleep eyes, glanced at the flyer and typed a few words into the computer. "Ma'am, has it been over 48 hours?" "No, but they're minors." Ryan snapped. "Then by regulation, the case doesn't yet meet the criteria for urgency. It's possible they left home on their own." Irene's eyes widened in disbelief. "What did you just say?" "Left on their own." Charles has never gone anywhere without telling us. John doesn't even know how to go anywhere alone, Laura added, her lips pale. Samuel shrugged. We understand you're worried. But honestly, this is Chicago. Dozens of teens go missing every day. 99% of the time, it's over some boyfriend, girlfriend, or some silly reason. We didn't come here for your cold theories. Ryan slammed his hand on the desk. An older officer in a leather jacket stepped out. What's all the noise about? Sir, Samuel gestured, 2 parents reporting missing minors. But the time threshold hasn't been met. The senior officer, Lieutenant Morgan, glanced at the flyer. File the report. But frankly, I don't see any signs of criminal activity. They're probably just hanging out somewhere. You think 2 well-behaved kids vanishing for 36 hours is normal? Irene hissed, her eyes bloodshot. Morgan shook his head. We'll log it. But if you want quick action, you'll have to do it yourselves. Reality is, limited staff, limited resources. The next day, both families printed hundreds of flyers, missing, John Carter and Charles Davis. Height, 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 11 inches. Brown and blue eyes. Last seen in South Side, Chicago. If you have any info, call. Ryan and his wife went from lamppost to bus stop, taping flyers. Irene handed them out while crying, her hands trembling. We can't sit still anymore, Ryan said to a neighbor, an old man named Thomas who played chess every afternoon. Thomas hesitated. Maybe, the boys just got caught up in something fun. Laura's voice turned cold. Thomas, we've lived next to each other for 10 years. You really believe that? He fell silent, then turned and went back inside. 4 days later. A short blog post appeared on a local site and got a few shares. 2 15-year-old boys missing in South Side. Suspected to have run away. Some sources say possibly linked to a group of girls from Leganés. No signs of foul play. Comments underneath. Probably ran off chasing girls. 2 more junkies gone. Whatever. They left on their own. Don't bother the police. When Laura read it, her hands froze, and she dropped her phone on the tile floor. Ryan stood silent, turning his face away. Why are people so cruel? Meanwhile, the police never called back. No clues. No footage. No witnesses. Irene decided to go door to door around the neighborhood, questioning every shop employee. Excuse me, did you see these 2 boys last Sunday? A young guy at the phone store looked over. Not sure. Maybe. Who are they? My son. Oh, don't remember. Been busy. A middle-aged woman, Mary, who sold bread, sighed. I saw them that day. They were talking, laughing. I even joked how happy they looked. And then, nothing. I thought they went home. Day 10. Ryan stopped speaking. He stopped eating, sitting for hours in front of a blank TV screen. Laura had to spoon soup into his mouth. Ryan. John will come back. He will. He stared into the void. I failed to protect him, Laura. I failed. Irene started walking the streets at night, knocking on doors of police stations and news outlets. The answers were always the same. Not enough data. No witnesses. We're sorry, ma'am. At a local government press conference, when a reporter brought up the case, spokesperson James Allen simply said, "We are monitoring the situation. No signs at this time." In an unknown location, the 2 boys were living through the worst days of their lives. In a cold room with no windows, chipped concrete walls, and a flickering yellow fluorescent light above, there was no sound but dripping water from a pipe and faint groans from a dark corner. John opened his eyes first. They felt heavy, his vision blurry. His hands were tied behind his back, his mouth taped shut. As he tried to move, he realized he had no feeling in his legs. Next to him, Charles was still motionless. The steel door creaked open. Clank. A tall, thin man stepped inside, wearing a crisp white lab coat and medical gloves, his hair neatly combed. Behind his glasses, his eyes gleamed with excitement. "Hello, boys." His voice was smooth, tone calm, sending chills down the spine. "I'm Dr. Michael Sanders. Don't worry. I'm a man of science. Not the lunatic you're probably imagining." Charles stirred slightly, trying to open his eyes. Who are you?" I'll kill you if." Michael laughed. "Brave one. Good. The more resistance, the more data." He crouched in front of John, lifting his chin. "This one, ideal femur. Golden ratio. Just like the models in old anatomy books." He turned to a steel table full of tools, scalpels, forceps, clamps, surgical gear. Behind it, a whiteboard crowded with anatomical sketches of legs, marked with handwritten notes: quadriceps curvature, fibular landing angle, optimal knee axis. John groaned under the tape, MMPH. Michael turned back, holding a syringe. "Don't worry. I won't use anesthesia. You need to be awake so I can measure real-time muscular response." "That's true science." Charles thrashed. "You monster. You'll die for this." "Thanks," Michael said, pulling out a scalpel. "I've heard that one before." Oddly enough, still alive. The sound of metal slicing flesh echoed through the chamber. "ARG. MOM. John screamed in agony. Blood spurted from his thigh. Michael calmly made notes. Muscle reflex quite strong. Noted, 4.8 seconds to full contraction post-incision. Charles screamed, "Stop. Please stop. Don't hurt him anymore. I'm begging you." Michael smiled, walking toward Charles. "Your turn." Charles thrashed violently. "I swear, if I survive this, I'll tear you apart." "I admire that determination. The more samples I have, the better for anthropological research." Michael pressed Charles's head down and pulled out a small drill. The piercing whine of the machine echoed reettt before stopping as he pressed it against Charles's left knee. "Don't, please." Reetit. Charles's scream froze the very air in the bunker. Blood splattered, spraying onto Michael's face. He didn't flinch. He licked a trail of blood off his wrist and whispered, "Divinity lies in human blood." "Just as I thought." 2 hours later, only groans and ragged breathing filled the room. John was curled up, legs soaked in blood, trembling. Charles had passed out and come to again, drenched in cold sweat. "Charles," John whimpered. We're going to die, aren't we?" Charles murmured, No, we're not, we'll find a way out." John cried softly. "I want to go home. I want my mom. I want to hear the birds at the park on Sunday mornings." Michael's laughter echoed through a speaker in the ceiling. "Don't dream. There are no Sundays here." Day 2. Michael continued his operations. This time, he cut the ligament in John's left leg and stitched it back with thick, black thread. Testing how the body destabilizes with one altered ligament. John screamed until his voice was hoarse. Charles yelled helplessly, tears streaming down his face. "Oh God, why us?" Michael replied casually, "Because you're ideal subjects. No drugs, no pre-existing conditions, clean bodies. Nearly perfect. Shame there's only 2. Charles hissed, "You sick bastard, you won't get away with this." Michael pressed a button and injected a sedative into Charles's neck. No noise. I need focus. Day 3. Michael wheeled the boys upstairs on an old gurney. They were tied down, their legs beginning to rot, the air thick with the stench of blood and decay. A woman appeared at the door, dressed in an old nurse's uniform. Claire's short, curly hair. "Mr. Michael, this has gone too far." Michael turned. "Did you come to clean or to preach?" "They're just kids. They're perfect specimens. If you don't want to end up with them in the lab, keep your mouth shut." Claire looked down, gripping the mop tightly. That night, Michael loaded the 2 boys into an old truck, tossing them into the back like trash. "That's enough. I've got the data. Keeping them would just get in the way." "You're just going to dump them?" Claire asked. "Take them to Skid Row. Leave them there. No one cares." "Michael, you're a monster. You're just now realizing that. How sad." The truck rolled away into the night. No horn. No lights. Just 2 mangled boys lying still in the freezing cargo space, dried blood crusted beneath them. John moaned, "Charles, are you still alive?" "Yeah. Promise me, if one of us makes it, you'll tell the world." "No. We're both going to live." "John, don't sleep. Don't sleep." The truck stopped at a junction in Skid Row, a broken-down neighborhood full of garbage heaps and rats. The back door swung open, and 2 small, bloodied bodies were shoved onto the ground like spoiled goods. Thud. Michael muttered, "Done. Let fate take it from here." Claire, standing beside him, burst into tears. "They'll die." Michael smirked, cleaning his glasses. "Doesn't matter. I got what I needed. Goodbye, Claire." The truck pulled away into the night. Claire ran forward, slipping 2 old rags into Charles's hand. "I'm sorry, please forgive me." The next morning, weak sunlight illuminated the empty lot where John and Charles lay curled up together, smeared in blood, filth, and bugs. Charles opened his eyes first. Dizzy from the stench, the barking dogs, the distant sounds of people. "John! John, wake up, come on." John groaned. "It hurts, my legs, where are my legs?" Charles tried to sit up. Both his legs were swollen, bruised, and oozing blood. The gauze was filthy, seeping pus, and smelled rotten. John's legs were no better, just slabs of flesh stitched with coarse black thread. Charles whispered, nearly sobbing, We don't have legs anymore." John screamed, the sound stretching long and broken across the alley. "No." 3 days later. They started crawling. No money. No ID. No one knew who they were. They didn't even have the strength to cry for help. John collapsed against a wall, gasping. "I can't. Charles. I can't go on." Charles looked at him. "If you stop, you'll die." "John, we have to live." "What for?" "Every time I look down, I see I'm not whole. It feels like a nightmare." A scrawny man walked by, glanced at them, and spat on the ground. "Trash. Even beggars should have some dignity." Charles called after him, "Please, we were kidnapped, help us." The man turned and kicked Charles in the side, making him cough violently. "Quit pretending. I've seen this trick 100 times." That evening, they took shelter under a bridge, wrapped in torn sacks. Charles whispered, "Remember when we used to sit on the balcony reading?" John smiled faintly. "Yeah, my mom would bring us cocoa. She used to call us the balcony nights." He started crying. "Now. I can't even walk, what will she think when she sees me like this?" Charles rasped, "She'll hold you tight. Because she's still looking for you." John choked, I just want to hug her, just once." The next day. They dragged themselves down alleys. Charles pulled himself forward with his hands, John clung to his shoulder. Slow. Charles. I'm dizzy. We need food. Or we'll starve. A child selling lottery tickets nearby pointed and laughed. Look. 2 human snakes crawling around. A woman selling snacks shouted, go somewhere else. You're scaring customers. Charles pleaded, please, just a little water. She cursed, go beg your damn father. Get lost. They slumped behind the market, next to a trash bin. Charles reached in and pulled out a moldy piece of bread. John hesitated. You're really going to eat that? Charles nodded. We don't have a choice. He gave most of it to John. Eat. You're weaker than me. John teared up. You always do this. Charles forced a smile. If I die, who's going to drag you with me? As night fell, they searched for shelter behind an abandoned container. A bald, drunken man passed by and shoved them aside. Get out. This is my spot. Charles replied, we're just asking to sleep here for one night. The man said nothing. He kicked Charles in the face, knocking him to the ground, mouth bleeding. If I see you here again, I'll douse you in gasoline and light you up. John trembled, pulling Charles back. Charles, you're bleeding. Charles let out a bitter laugh. At least, he didn't cut anything off. That night, heavy rain poured. They huddled together under a crumbling roof. John asked, do you still believe we'll survive? Charles looked up. I don't know. But if we die, I want to die next to you. John nodded. Thank you, for not leaving me. Charles smiled. Even with ruined legs, I've still got hands to drag you along. A week later. They started crawling to intersections, holding out their hands for spare change. No one stopped. A teenage girl on a bike paused and handed them a few coins. God won't abandon you. Charles thanked her, thank you, really. But a man behind her yelled. Don't give them anything. They're addicts. Pickpockets. The girl hesitated, then pulled her hand back and rode away. Charles whispered, even the kind ones are afraid of us. John buried his face in his hands. What are we now, Charles? Are we even human? Charles didn't answer. At the corner of Lexington Avenue, 2 curled-up figures sat beneath a billboard, holding up a trembling cardboard sign. We were kidnapped. Please, 1 coin to survive. People rushed by. Umbrellas shielding faces. No one looked directly at them. A young woman in a fur coat glanced over and sneered. More freak beggars. Chicago is disgusting these days. The man next to her laughed. Probably zombie cosplayers. Look at their legs, gross. Charles lowered the sign, voice drained. Did you hear that? John nodded, too numb to cry. Every time I hear it, I die a little more inside. That afternoon, a group of teens on bikes stopped a few meters away. One of them, red-haired, held up his phone. Yo, film this. This clip's gonna go viral. He stepped forward and shoved the phone in Charles's face. Hey, cripple. Tell me a ghost story. How'd you lose your legs, huh? Couldn't run fast enough. Charles tried to turn away but was too slow. Another kid kicked the food box in front of John, sending it flying. Oh no. Their lunch is gone, they all laughed. Charles screamed, enough. Get lost. One of them replied. Boo, angry cripple. So scary. They rode off, still laughing. Bye, zombie bros. John picked up the box, hands shaking. They laughed, while we're starving. Charles gripped his hand. We can't break. Not now. They crawled to an old metro station, huddling at the bottom of the stairs. A large, drunk man approached, reeking of alcohol. My sleeping spot. Move. Charles said gently. We just want to rest here for one night. We'll leave in the morning. I said move. He kicked Charles in the face, sending him sprawling. Blood dripped from his nose. John screamed, stop. Please don't. The man growled. If I see you here tomorrow, I'll burn you alive. He stumbled away. Charles slowly sat up, blood on his chin. Are we still alive? John hugged him, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. Charles whispered. I don't need protection. I just need you here. The next morning, John developed a fever. His body burned with heat, his eyes dull and unfocused. Charles panicked. John! Wake up! You've got a fever. John groaned. My hands are cold, but inside, it feels like fire. Charles looked around, desperate. I have to get you to a hospital. With the last of his strength, Charles carried John on his back, dragging himself meter by meter to the nearest hospital, St. Mary's Medical Center. A security guard stopped him at the gate. Stop! What are you doing here? Charles pleaded, please, my friend has a high fever, we were kidnapped, we. The guard cut him off. Do you have a health card? Charles went still. We don't have anything. Then leave. This isn't a charity ward. The guard turned his back. An older doctor passed by, glanced at the unconscious boy on Charles's back, shook his head, and walked on. Charles screamed, please. He's going to die. No one stopped. No one answered. A young nurse approached, name tag, Beatrice. She whispered, I could get in trouble for helping you. But go to Santa Mary Church. There's a charity group there. They might help. Charles choked up. Thank you, ma'am. That night, John was still feverish, curled up in a narrow alley. Charles sat watching over him, eyes wide with fear that John might never wake up. Do you remember, when we were kids, we used to play that game, Crossing the Ocean, Charles murmured. John managed a weak smile. Yeah, we used pillows as boats, our hands as paddles. Charles gripped his friend's hand. I'm not going to let you die. Even if the whole world turns its back, I'm still here. John closed his eyes gently. I believe you. At dawn, an older man collecting scrap paper passed by. He stopped, looking at the two filthy, crippled boys curled up on the ground. His name was Louis, around 60, wearing a worn-out coat. Where did you boys come from? He asked. Charles opened his eyes. I'm Charles. This is John. We had our legs cut off, we were thrown out like trash. Louis said nothing. His face twisted in grief. He reached into his cart and pulled out a cold lunchbox. Here. I was saving this for lunch, but you need it more. Tears welled in Charles's eyes. Thank you, you're the first person who hasn't called us monsters. Louis sat down beside them. I lost my son in an accident. If he were alive, he'd be your age now. He wiped his eyes. I can't do much, but I'll come back. I promise. John nodded weakly. Thank you, sir. That afternoon, the same group of teenagers returned. This time, they had plastic pellet guns. Hey, zombies. Take this. Pop. Pop. The pellets hit Charles in the chest. John tried to shield him. Get out of here. They laughed. One of them yelled, even cripples can yell, huh? Suddenly, an old voice rang out. Leave them alone. Louis appeared, holding a wooden stick. The teens froze. One stepped up. Who the hell are you, old man? Wanna die? Cowards. Attacking disabled children. Are you even human? A nearby vendor woman ran over. I'm calling the police. The teens fled. Louis sat down, hands shaking. Charles shouted, "Why did you help us? You'll get in trouble." Louis smiled. Because I'm human. That's all. Night fell over Chicago. In an abandoned park behind Union Station, the two small figures huddled under a decaying awning, wrapped tightly in old plastic tarps Louis had given them the week before. Wind whistled through every crack. Each gust cut like a knife. Charles shivered. "John, are you still awake?" John nodded slightly, voice barely a whisper. "Yeah. I can't sleep, my heart's racing." Charles pulled the tarp up around both of them. "I'll get up early tomorrow. Louis said there's a place by the movie theater that needs someone to hand out flyers." John whispered, "We're still alive, right?" Charles gave a sad smile. "If it still hurts, we're alive." John was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you still remember the smell of your mom's fabric softener?" Charles nodded. "Yeah. That sweet orange scent on my pajamas. Now all I smell is blood and garbage. There will be other days. A different day will come. Early morning." They dragged themselves out of the park. Charles carried a cloth bag full of flyers printed for free by a friend of Louis. Outside AMC theaters, they picked a quiet corner so they wouldn't get chased off. Charles started handing flyers to passers-by. "Hello, here's this month's movie offers." A young man grabbed one and immediately threw it into the trash. "A cripple who can read? That's rich." Charles bit his lip and said nothing. A woman passing by stared at John. "Why aren't you in a care center? Or do you enjoy playing the pity game?" John softly replied, "We just want to live." She shrugged. "People like you shouldn't have been born." Charles whispered, "Ignore it. They don't know anything." A 10-year-old boy walked by and tugged his mother's hand. "Mom, why don't those uncles have legs?" The mother rushed him away. "Be quiet. Don't look." By noon, they collapsed on the curb. Not a single flyer had been taken. The cold wind cracked Charles's lips. Blood seeped from the corners. A young man in a dark hoodie approached, looked around, then grabbed their cloth bag full of flyers and the few coins they had collected from the previous day. Charles shouted, "No. Give it back. That's our hard work." The man kicked Charles hard in the shoulder, knocking him flat. "Shut up, trash," he snarled, then walked off. John burst into tears. "Why us? What did we do wrong?" Charles sat still, eyes hollow. "There's no reason. Some people are just born to be stepped on." John sank down. "I can't do this anymore. Every time we crawl out, we just get kicked down harder." Charles hugged him. "We've hit bottom. There's nowhere to go but up." John screamed, "I don't want to crawl. I want to walk like a normal person. I want to stand on my own without needing anyone." Charles stayed quiet. After a while, he said softly, "I understand." That night, John curled up in a dark corner of the park. He had a low fever, his clothes soaked with cold sweat. Charles pulled the tarp tighter around him. "You need to sleep. Tomorrow will be better." John shook his head slightly. "I don't believe in tomorrow anymore." Charles's voice cracked. "Then believe in me. Just a little." A saw's screech echoed in John's mind. He jolted upright, eyes wide, screaming. "No. Don't saw my leg. Don't saw it again." Charles wrapped him in his arms. "John. It's me. There's no one here. Calm down. John whimpered, that saw, it plays in my head every night. Charles rubbed his back gently. We're not there anymore. You're safe now. But John kept trembling. The next day, they went to Fulton Market District, hoping to sell a few candies given by a kind neighbor of Lewis's. Charles pushed himself forward. Ma'am, would you buy some candy? The woman frowned. Who said you could sit here and sell? We just need a few coins, to buy porridge for my friend. Get lost. I pay $30 a day to rent this spot. This isn't a charity. An elderly vendor nearby stepped over. Let them stay, Teresa. They're not bothering anyone. Teresa snapped, if you defend them again, I'm reporting you to market management. John whispered, I feel dizzy. Charles held him upright and said gently, we'll leave. Don't say another word. They crawled back to their usual park corner. John leaned against a wall, eyes closed. Charles removed his scarf and wiped his friend's face. John mumbled like he was dreaming, Charles, if one day, you have to go on alone, promise me you'll tell our story. Charles shook his head, eyes stinging. No. We'll tell it together. No one walks alone. John gave a faint smile. You're always like that, so stubborn. That night, rain poured down. The tarp was blown away by the wind. John and Charles huddled together, drenched, like two nameless shadows forgotten by the world. John whispered, do you think, our parents still remember our faces? Charles didn't answer. He wasn't sure. All he knew was that in their eyes, there was no light left, only ashes and the endless sound of a saw that never stopped. Chicago, winter 2021. Inside a small apartment on the Upper East Side, an aging woman stood still before a large window. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes sunken from years of sleepless nights. Her name was Claire Moore. For 16 years, she had lived like a ghost, carrying a secret too heavy to bear. On the table lay a stack of documents stamped with the hospital's seal, medical records, X-ray scans, DNA samples and finally, a photo of two legless boys, their eyes dull, curled up in the corner of a park. Claire's hand trembled as she picked up a pen and began writing the first line of her confession. His name is Michael Sanders. A cosmetic surgeon. He kidnapped, mutilated, and discarded children like garbage. I am a witness. I can't stay silent any longer. She wiped her tears, sealed the letter, and addressed it to Special Crimes Division, National Police. A week later, at the Chicago Police Headquarters, Lieutenant Henry Vaughn placed the file on his desk, frowning. You sure about this, Raymond? An anonymous letter from someone claiming to be a former nurse, and you want to reopen this case? Inspector Raymond Owens, old but sharp, nodded. Look closely. There are details here that only someone in the field would know. And most importantly, the names of the two victims, John Carter and Charles Davis. Vaughn's eyes widened. The two kids who went missing in 2005. That case was buried. Raymond took a long drag on his cigarette. Because no one wanted it reopened. But I still remember the look in that mother's eyes. I've never forgotten it. A special task force was deployed. They quietly investigated the old hospital where Michael once worked and began combing through his network of cosmetic clinics. One night in early February, they stormed a luxurious mansion in the suburbs of Beverly Hills. Michael was sipping wine, reading the newspaper. When the glass doors shattered, he barely had time to react before he was subdued. You are under arrest on suspicion of crimes against minors, kidnapping, torture, and human rights violations, Raymond declared, handcuffing him. Michael chuckled. You're too late. Even science doesn't need me anymore. Raymond slapped him hard across the face. Don't let me forget what you are. In the mansion's basement, police uncovered an intact underground lab, operating tables, files, anatomical sketches, clinical photos, and video recordings of experiments. On the wall, a large board displayed two names, Charles and John. Raymond whispered, "Dear God." Vaughn flipped through the files. One thick folder read, Experiment 27, Adolescent Male Leg Structure. Attached were images of the two boys, tied up, crying, their legs soaked in blood. A young officer vomited on the spot. Raymond clenched his fists. "We've let monsters walk free for too long." The following afternoon, the news swept across the United States. Dr. Michael Sanders arrested prime suspect in 2005 abduction of two teens. Task force uncovers underground lab with visual evidence and specimens linked to dozens of child victims. Among the confirmed cases, John Carter and Charles Davis, whose disappearance once shocked the South Side community. The investigation is now expanding. Inside Laura Carter's old apartment, the television blared. She collapsed to the floor, her mouth agape but silent. The glass of water she had been holding shattered beside her. Ryan rushed in from the other room. "What happened?" Laura pointed at the screen. There was an old photo of John next to it, a recent one of a gaunt, legless boy with hollow eyes. Ryan froze. "John, that's our son." Laura screamed like someone possessed. "Why? Why couldn't we find him? 16 years. Ryan held her as tears streamed down his own face. "We didn't trust our hearts." At Irene's home, Charles's mother, it was even worse. She stood frozen before the TV, then collapsed. But she didn't cry. She didn't speak. Her husband, Esteban, panicked, trying to lift her. "Irene. Irene." She stared into the void, eyes soulless. As if something had torn her spirit apart. Then, a broken sound escaped her throat like a snapped violin string. "Charles, my son, oh God, is this how you lived?" She wailed and beat her chest, the floor, anything near her. "Monsters. You let my baby become this? God." On social media, people shared the boys' photos with hashtags. Hashtag Charles and John. Hashtag 16 years of silence. Hashtag justice now. Many cried. But it was too late. In a small South Side park, a reporter stumbled upon two legless homeless men eating dry bread under a tree. "What's your name?" the reporter asked. Charles didn't answer. He glanced at John. John whispered, "Charles Davis." "I'm John Carter." The reporter froze. You're the boys from that case." Charles cut in, "Not boys. We're the shadows the world forgot." John nodded. "And now, we have nothing left to lose." At Chicago PD, the interrogation room echoed with the rhythmic tapping of a pen. Michael Sanders sat silently, hands cuffed, eyes vacant. Inspector Raymond Owens shoved a thick file onto the table. "You know what this is?" Michael glanced at it. "I've lived long enough not to reread my own work." Raymond gritted his teeth. "What you did wasn't science. It was evil. That research destroyed lives." Michael sighed. "We are all tools of evolution. Those who don't understand that will never be great." Raymond slammed the table. "You'll die in prison. But before that, you'll watch those two boys you thought you killed rise and walk again." One misty morning in South Side, the park where two homeless men were once ignored was now full of people. Claire Moore, the nurse who exposed Michael, stepped forward. Her eyes glistened with tears. "Charles. John, do you remember me? I'm Claire. The nurse from the basement." Charles looked at her, hesitant. You're the one who put that cloth in my hand that night." John quietly nodded. "You were the only one who didn't laugh when you saw us." Claire knelt. "I'm sorry. I was a coward, for far too long." Charles said softly, "We don't blame you. We just needed to know if anyone still believed in us." Claire held their hands. "The whole country believes now." That afternoon, John and Charles were transferred to a special rehabilitation center at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Head of department, Dr. Lucy Dawson, greeted them. "Hello, boys. My name is Lucy. But from now on, you can call me your companion." Charles hesitated. "Doctor, what will you do to us?" Lucy smiled. "We won't cut, measure, or experiment. We'll heal. Piece by piece." John still looked timid. We don't have legs." Lucy sat beside them. "Then we'll give you something better, prosthetic legs built with the most advanced bionic technology available." Charles's eyes widened. "Really? We're backed by the European Human Rights Fund. And believe me, no one deserves it more than you." The process began with thorough evaluations. Old wounds, infections, joint damage, psychological trauma, everything was assessed in detail. One day, Lucy entered carrying 2 prosthetic legs with neural sensor systems. "Are you ready?" she asked. John swallowed. What if we can't walk?" Lucy held his hand. "Then we start again." Charles laughed. "Sounds like building with Lego." Lucy grinned. "Yes. But this time, we're rebuilding a life." The first attempt to stand. The room fell silent. Charles sat on the bed, looking at the glinting prosthetics under the lights. John trembled beside him. Lucy supported Charles. "Focus on your knees. Feel the signals from your brain." Charles tensed. One leg twitched. Then the other. "Good. Now try to stand." He summoned all his strength, trembling, inch by inch. Then, he stood. John gasped, "Charles. You're standing." Charles laughed through tears. "John. I'm standing." Lucy wiped her eyes. "You're not just standing. You just stepped into a new life." The next day was John's turn. He stared at the prosthetics, hesitating. "What if I fall?" Charles walked over on crutches. "Then I'll pull you back up. Like always." John smiled. "You're still stubborn." Charles held out his hand. "Always." John gripped it, trembling. 1, 2, 3. He stood. Light streamed through the window, illuminating a face long forgotten, now glowing like a child rediscovering himself. John cried. "Mom. I'm standing again." 2 weeks later, they began walking in the hospital courtyard. They fell. They hurt. But they laughed. From afar, Lucy watched them, eyes wet. Nothing is more beautiful than 2 souls who realize they're still alive. One late afternoon, Lewis arrived at the hospital gate. Charles shouted, "Mr. Lewis." The old man stepped inside, holding a bag of pastries. "Brought your favorites, boys." John laughed. "You still remember what we like." "Old memory, young heart," he joked. Charles invited him to sit. "I never said thank you enough. If it weren't for you, we'd be dead." Lewis patted their shoulders. "You two are living proof of what society tried to bury. Now, live, but never be silent again." A week later, they received a special invitation. The International Human Rights Forum invites Charles Davis and John Carter as honored speakers. Lucy read the letter, voice trembling. "Are you ready?" Charles pressed his lips together. "We're scared." John added, "Really scared." Lucy nodded. "Good. People who aren't afraid haven't known pain. But you have me. And you have each other." Charles looked at John. "And this time, we'll walk onto that stage with our own legs." John gripped his hand. The world will have to listen. At the International Forum Hall in Chicago, every seat was filled. On stage, 2 microphones waited. In the audience, journalists, human rights experts, students, and international representatives. The host stepped up. His voice echoed across the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, today we won't just hear a speech. We will witness 2 souls who were once buried in darkness rise again with the most powerful force. The power of survival and humanity. Please welcome Charles Davis and John Carter. Thunderous applause. John and Charles stepped out, prosthetic legs carrying them forward with steady resolve. The room went silent for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Charles spoke first. We take no pride in telling this story. But if we stay silent, more children will be murdered in silence. John continued. 16 years ago, we lost our legs. But worse than that, we lost our voices. No one believed. No one listened. Charles reached out and held John's hand. Today, we're not standing here to ask for pity. We're standing here to remind the world, silence is complicity. The applause lasted nearly a full minute. A week later, images and videos of the speech spread across social media. Major news outlets ran headlines. Teen boys turned test subjects become living symbols of resilience. Charles and John, they may no longer have legs, but they've learned to stand with their souls. Elle Pace dedicated its cover to them, with the headline, Voices that cannot be silenced. A major publishing house contacted Dr. Lucy Dawson. We want to publish a book about their story. But not just a dry report, we want the pages to breathe, to sound like them telling it themselves. Lucy shared the offer with Charles and John. Charles scratched his head. I've never written anything serious before. John laughed. But you tell stories like a real author. Charles thought for a moment. If we write, we leave nothing out. The blood, the saw, the despair. John nodded. And the hope too. They began writing each memory, each cold night, every buried word. Lucy helped edit. Lewis read every chapter, tears falling without him realizing. This book should be taught in schools, he said. 2 months later, the book launched at the Library of Congress. The crowd was so large they had to stream the event live outside. Title: We no longer have legs, but we've learned to stand with our souls. During the signing, a 10-year-old girl approached, hugging the book tightly. My name is Martina. I read the part where Uncle Charles carried Uncle John to find porridge, and I cried. Charles knelt, smiling. You know, in moments like that, we didn't need legs, we just needed each other. Martina looked up. I want to be a doctor. So I can make prosthetic legs like yours. John hugged her. You're already the best thing that's happened to us. They were invited to schools. Every time they appeared, students stood and applauded. The kids listened to every word, even the silence carried weight. One student cried. Why did the adults let that happen to you? Charles answered. Because sometimes, adults close their eyes and look away. But if you keep your eyes open and your hearts lit, you'll be different. John added. Justice starts with listening. One day, they returned to South Side. As the car entered their old street, John choked up. Charles, this is where we used to live. Charles whispered, I never imagined seeing this again. At the end of the block, a crowd was waiting. Elderly folks, children, neighbors, teachers, even people who had once turned their backs 16 years ago. An older woman rushed forward and hugged John tightly. John. It's me, your mom. It's me. John froze for a moment, then broke down in tears like a child. Mom. I'm sorry. I'm home. Beside them, Charles saw Esteban and Irene. Irene trembled, stepping forward, her hand reaching out like she feared touching a ghost. Charles whispered, "It's me." She cried out, "Charles. Oh God, my son, you're still alive." The entire neighborhood erupted, some clapping, some crying, some frozen in disbelief. Louis stood behind the crowd, whispering to Lucy. "Dear God, finally." The city of Chicago awarded them a medal for contributions to human rights and spiritual strength. At the ceremony, the mayor said, "Charles and John didn't just survive. They made us look at ourselves. For years, it wasn't just justice we lacked, it was the courage to face the truth." On national television, John said, "We hold no grudges. But please remember, there are children out there, waiting to hear someone say, 'We believe you.' Don't make them wait 16 years. Charles concluded. "And if you see someone falling, reach out your hand. You might just help a soul stand up again." At the end of that year, a bronze statue was erected in South Side Park, two legless teenagers holding hands, looking forward. Below it, engraved, "We were once forgotten. Now we remind humanity never to forget." Lucy wept as she gazed at the statue. Louis laid flowers at its base. Claire Moore bowed her head for a long time. At sunset one evening, Charles and John sat together, watching the sky fade. John asked, "Do you think Michael is still alive?" Charles nodded. "Yes. But this time, he doesn't have a scalpel. No cold room. Just a prison cell." John sighed. "That's enough." Charles smiled. "No. It's not enough. But we've reclaimed what was rightfully ours." John nodded. "You're right." A gentle breeze swept through. They closed their eyes, breathing in deeply. For the first time in 16 years, they felt it. Breathing was a privilege. The story of John and Charles is a profound reminder of the cost of silence and indifference. Physical wounds may heal, but the apathy of society can prolong pain for decades. Yet as long as even one person dares to speak, hope remains. This is not just a story of standing on prosthetic legs. It is a story of standing with faith, unity, and humanity. No one should be forgotten. No one deserves to live as a shadow.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.